you have taste in a way that's meaningful to software people.
Hello, I'm Bill Gates.
I would recommend TypeScript. Yeah, it writes a lot of code for me, and usually it's slightly wrong.
I'm reminded incidentally of Rust here.
Rust. This almost makes me happy that I didn't become a supermodel.
Cooper and Netties.
Well, I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what's going on.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about large neural networks. It's really an honor to be here.
Rust.
Data Topics.
Welcome to the Data.
Welcome to the Data Topics podcast.
Hello and welcome to Data Topics Unplugged, your casual corner of the web where we discuss what's new in data every week, from strawberries to the speed of light. UV? No, too much? Anyways, anything goes. We're live streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, not X anymore, but we're still on Twitch. So feel free to check us out there. Feel free to leave a comment, question, and we'll try to address. Today is the 17th of September of 2024. So after a long break, we're back. Do we have that? We're back. No? Anyways. We're back. My name is Murillo. I'll be hosting today, joined by my sidekick. I'm not sure if I can call you sidekick, Bart, but Bart nonetheless.
Sidekick?
Sidekick? Okay, yeah. Bart. And the return of Jonas. Can we get an applause for that?
Hello.
Hey, Jonas, how are you?
Great.
Yeah. Maybe for the people that missed the first time. So this is your second appearance, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
You came back, so that's always good. For the people that missed maybe the first one, you want to give a quick intro about who you are, what you do, fun facts?
So I'm Jonas. I'm a machine learning engineer here at DataRoots. I did a PhD before at KU Leuven, and now I made the jump here. I'm in the industry doing cool AI, ML, and MLOps things.
Cool. So
happy to have you back again.
Indeed. We have a very, very hot topic. So no one better than Jonas to give us the deets.
Being, why were you off for so long?
That was not what I was thinking, but maybe. Why have we been away for so long, Bart?
Show it to the people. People that are listening, he's holding up a big golden ring.
Well, you say like that, you sound like a gangster, you know? Go chains, go to, yeah. I have gotten married, so I was away for a while. But
congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. So yeah, I was a bit away. Actually, the wedding was in Portugal as well. So to go there, to come back, I had some remote work and whatnot. We made it work. Also did the Paris Olympics. Maria did, my partner, my wife did the yeah. See?
I used to need to say that.
Yeah, I know. So there was a lot of cool stuff as well. We went with our dogs. They were the ring bearers as well. It was a very nice, everything was perfect. So very happy. Was a lot of driving as well. Went with the car to go with the dogs. So now we're back. Still adjusting a bit back to the routine, waking up and doing this and that, but very happy to be back. So if I forget some things, to click, change the screen, feel free to let me know. It's been a while.
You're rusty.
I'm a bit rusty. That is it. But so a lot of stuff happened while we were gone. I think at the end as well, we can give a little update as well on Data Topics Unplugged going forward, right? With the deep dives and whatnot. A lot of stuff happened. There's a lot to talk about, but maybe the freshest news right out of the oven is. Can you want to take a guess, Jonas?
Yeah, it's the strawberry.
Yes. What is the strawberry?
OpenAI's strawberry.
Yes. What is that?
So they released a new model, or at least a preview of a new model. They call it ChatGPT 01. So they reset their naming scheme because they say this is such big advancement that we start from one again. And so what they say is the advancement is that it's a reasoning model, or that's how they call it. So it's supposed to be able to reason better than ChatGPT 4.0, their previous model. And with that come big improvements in certain domains. For example, they have now benchmarks on mathematical reasoning, physics-based reasoning, and a few others, where they show very, very big improvements over previous models and models of competitors.
So O1 is a change, right? So I think they also, before it was called GPT, which stands for generally or pre-trained transformers, no?
I'm not sure what the G stands for.
But it is
General.
about it refers to the transformer architecture. So the idea, I mean, from what I understood as well, is that O1, they're referring to a different type of model, right? It's not the same model that is trained on new data or more scale. It's like it's a different architecture. What is different about it? What's maybe the gist?
It's performance, maybe
Performance?
to start with.
Yes, that's
It's performing way better on a certain set of tests. So they tested it on competition math test, competition code test, PhD level science questions, and it's clearly outperforming GPT 4.0, which I think, but still is a bit considered the de facto standard. Huh?
GPT 4.0 it wasn't the best performing though, right? The 4.0 was like the more the smaller yet performing.
The multi-model one. Yeah.
Yeah.
There were some tests where GPT the 4 was a little bit better, yeah, but it was more or less comparable. Huh?
I see.
But like the difference here, as I were discussing, it's a significant uplift from what it was.
Yeah, actually, I read quite a bit about it, but I realized now that I didn't really read the OpenAI's announcement. So I'm just looking here for the first time. So they also have this chain of thought thing, right? That now is built in. Maybe someone wants to take a crack at what it is.
Yeah, I think this is what this is one of the things we do know about the model, because of course they're a bit hesitant on sharing technical details, but they do mention chain of thought. So now when you type a prompt into, as you're used to in ChatGPT, but you select this preview model, you won't get a response immediately. You'll get like a small prompt, a small notification that says, I'm thinking. And then it will give some vague indication of what it's thinking about. And only afterwards, it will start generating your response. And this is something we discussed in the previous podcast where I was. It's basically chain of thought. So the model doesn't immediately start generating its answer. It first generates additional words that are only visible to the model. And in these words, it's actually thinking about things. So it might try to kind of, if it's a complex problem, it will first try to figure out simpler steps. And then it will find solutions for these simpler steps. And this all happens within that hidden thinking, these thinking tokens. And then once the model has thought enough, between brackets, then it will start generating the response. And it can use all of this thinking that it has generated before to generate its response.
Yeah, I think you explained it really well. The one thing for me, and I think this is something that some people already voiced internally in our Slack, that is this something really, really new, or is this because like you mentioned, we talked about this in the last podcast. So this is not something that the first time we see it. So would you consider this something a novelty, let's say, or would you say that they're like what's new about it?
Opinions are very different of different people. Some people will say there's nothing new here. This is just chain of thought. We've seen this before. They just scaled it up. It's one opinion that's out there. I believe there are some new things, maybe not in the principle. It's still a stochastic parrot, as people say. But the way it's trained is definitely probably a bit different than previous models, or at least the way it's fine-tuned is probably different. And then there's, of course, a lot of speculation about what the model actually does. There's also speculation about how the response is being generated, that this is not the same as before.
What do we know about how it's being trained? This new, because what I understand, it's not like theoretically you can do this with a system on top where you have a first output and then you question that output again to basically initiate a bit of a chain of thought. But here this is really encapsulated in the model, from what I understand, right? what do we know about how this was trained?
So I've read a lot on this, or at least all the links, most of the links in Slack. And of course, there's a lot of speculation here. So it's difficult to actually know what is speculation and what we actually know. So they hinted towards this chain of thought, and they also hinted towards some data efficient way of fine-tuning the model to do this chain of thought itself. So it's not a prompt as you could do before. In ChatGPT, you could also say, first think a bit and then generate a response. It's not the same as that, because they really fine-tuned the model with a reinforcement learning procedure to already do this from its own.
So I think it's like, well, from if I understand what you're saying, because even Anthropic, right? Remember we talked about the chain of thought as well, like the reasoning for that Anthropic model was showing that it was trying to just deceive the user to give good feedback so they would get like good responses. And from what I understand here is just like during the training, the chain of thought process is going on during the training, I guess. And before it felt more it was a prompting strategy. But now this is something that is really built in the model. That's like they're really doing all these things. Maybe just real quick for people that are following on the live stream, this is just an example, I guess, right? So this is GPT 4.0 and this is the 01 preview. So actually this is a preview still, right? I think the 01 mini is available. Yeah. But now it's just preview. Another practicality is that it's not available for everyone. I think you need to have a certain account with a certain threshold. You spent this much money on OpenAI. I don't think anyone that has an OpenAI account, even the paid one, I think can just use it, I think. But basically, there's the same prompt, the same question on both left and right. Now for people that are just listening. And then on the left with 4.0, it just already starts with the let's break it down step by step. But then it gives basically the answer, right? And then on the right side where you see the 01 preview, they have a chain of thought that is collapsed, so you don't see what it is. And then it gives the answer there. And I'm not going to go through the whole text, but I'm assuming that what's on the right is better. And then if you click on the chain of thought, it actually says, oh, what's going on here? So basically, it's almost like, I guess this is almost like what a developer called rubber ducking, right? Like you just kind of say it out loud and just kind of put stuff, and then they kind of go iterate until they reach the response. Which, yeah.
That's a nice way to put it. Yeah.
That's yeah.
I tried it out a bit as well, and my experience, and I think there's also like what you hear in the community is like it's way better at very complex tasks, including coding tasks, like bigger code. Like if you say, give me the boilerplate for this type of project, like enough complex logic, where it's a much bigger chance that like your first iteration will give you something that works with 01 versus GPT 4.0, where you would have to ask follow-up questions. So yeah, but that doesn't seem correct, and it feels a little bit like these follow-up questions that you would normally have to ask to come to a good answer, that it now in the chain of thought process does that for you by expanding on your prompt, looking at it from different angles, and probably doing that better than you would do yourself as a follow-up question.
I see.
But also, I think also for a lot of simple questions, like the performance is very similar.
Yeah, and I think it's also, well, another article that I read from Simon Williamson, I think. He also was asking for example. Actually, I'll just put this on the screen. I think it's from here. Yeah, he also asked on Twitter, and I'll make this a bit bigger. For example, of prompts that failed on ChatGPT 4.0 but worked on preview, right? So one I thought was very clever, a bit not but introspective, right? So the prompt is, how many words are in your response by this prompt to this prompt? And 4.0 wasn't able to count the words ahead of time, but the 01 was, right? Yeah. Which I guess it makes sense when you think of, you prompt something and then you count, and then if you're not right, you prompt it again, So I think that to me makes sense. Also explaining jokes. So 2 cows are standing in the middle of a field. One cow asked another, what do you think about the mad cow disease that's going on around? The other one says, who cares? I'm a helicopter. And the 01 explanation actually made more sense, right? So I think, and even then, he also mentioned that the OpenAI researcher, so he gives the name Jason Wei, He said it's also hard, even for a researcher to really quantify these things, really find examples, and really try to understand. I think we're more in an abstract land here, right? So it's really hard to very concretely say this is better for these kinds of things and this is better for those kinds of things. But there is a general consensus that.
Yeah. And I think it's also a bit when you get into this more of a tree structure, like the answer could be this or this or that. And maybe we want to deep dive a bit, like because of this, the first one seems most viable. Let's deep dive into that, and then you branch out. And these type of exercises, it seems that O1 is really.
And when you say trees, almost like you have different possibilities and you want to explore them and see what comes out, and then to go back and maybe, which makes, I mean, intuitively, I would agree, right? Like if you have chain of thought and you actually put stuff out, it's almost like you're running each simulation, and then you see what actually came out of it. Right.
Difficult thing is we don't really know because it shows a chain of thought, but it's a summary basically that is being created by OpenAI. It's not the actual chain of thought that is behind.
So that's another thing that I read as well, that the chain of thought, it's not like you still use tokens. So actually, I also read that there are two types of tokens now. They call, I think, reasoning tokens, and they're called, and then the actual output tokens.
I think what Jonas was mentioning, these are the thinking tokens.
Yeah, thinking tokens, exactly.
Sounds very smart.
Sounds right, yeah. But what he was like, I read again, I didn't try myself, that a lot of the things that are in the chain of thought is not shown, which there are some criticisms to it. But they mentioned, because they don't want to, I think they mentioned competitive advantage. So basically they want their secret sauce to be out there. But also like to make sure that it complies to the code of conduct, the regulations, and all these things. So not sure how I feel about it yet. I think if you're really trying to build something that you really try to understand why the model is choosing A or B or C, it would be very beneficial. But I also think it's easier to not allow it and then in a year from now say, okay, we'll make it available, than to do the opposite as well. And so I think if I were in their position, I would probably do the same thing.
There were also some interesting observations that in this chain of thought, it's still something that the LLM just generates, and it's not guaranteed that the response that is being generated is based on what was reasoned before. So in some cases, there's a very extensive, they call it a model card. I didn't read it myself. But there they noted that sometimes it seemed that in the response, it didn't actually follow some of the reasoning that it had produced before.
I see. So it's basically like, because the way I understand as well is that like it outputs something on the conversation and that becomes context for the next answer, right?
Yeah.
Which is in a way kind of the same thing as what RAG is doing, right? You kind of add text in the context of the conversation, but the LLM can still hallucinate, right? Like you can still not use all the information you've put there and just kind of go sideways or do whatever, right? So it's it adds another unknown, I guess. Another thing that I remember reading again from the Simon Williamson blog post as well. Interesting tip from the API documentation: limit additional context in retrieval augmented generation, so RAG applications. Right. So basically, say when providing additional context or documents, include only the most relevant to prevent the model from overcomplicating its response. So
this is specifically for the O1 model.
Yes, I believe so. So I think this is going from the API documentation. Can I suggest locating? No,
That's interesting because with RAG you typically say, I'm gonna around the topic you have a database with documents. Around this topic, this person wants to know something, so I'm gonna inject the documents that are close to that.
Yeah.
And where you would normally say, okay, we know that, like, let's just take the top 10 documents.
Yeah.
Not worry too much about being too precise, but here they're saying like,
here they're saying the opposite.
The precise the better, because otherwise you might consider the other ones more than you should.
Indeed, which I also thought was an interesting thing. So maybe from this article as well, I'll put it on the show notes as well. I read it. I already forgot a lot of the stuff, but he also mentions a lot of stuff from the API documentation. So a lot of these hints, right? Because we don't know exactly what happened or what they did exactly down under the hood, let's say. But there's a lot of tips there. So cool stuff. The other thing that I also saw from a YouTube video, actually, that they made the analysis of the training compute and the inference compute, right? So O1, because of the chain of thought, it takes a lot more time to generate a response, right? And it takes more compute time. I think in the way they're, how do you say, they're correlated, right? If it takes more time, it's probably because it's taking more time to compute stuff. And then they thought one thing that was remarkable about this model is that we're showing that you can compensate inference time compute and overcome the performance of models that use compute only during the training time, right? And actually on that video, they were kind of saying like, oh, this is such a good thing, right? Because we're going to decrease the compute cost. I'm not sure about that though.
It's like basically you do an investment, you spend more time at training compute, but that's fine because lots of people are going to use it for inference. If you use it for inference enough, then you only need less compute for inference. Or you spend less time during pre-training, during the training phase, and more time during inference. Like there's a bit of a...
Indeed. And I think what's hard for me is like a lot of people use ChatGPT, I'm sure. So I would think at first that like, no, I don't think like switching the compute to the inference is probably a bad deal. You're probably spending more time in compute there overall. But then on the other hand, I have no idea how long it took to train the other models.
Yeah. But there's like in general, this is a bit of a remark. Like if you're ignoring the training versus inference, like this will probably take more compute, right?
For the O1,
the O1 versus
inference time
GPT-4,
for sure.
yeah.
Well, overall, I don't know, right? Like if all three of us are using,
like all things equal,
we expect. I mean, that's probably what I would guess.
But I think it's a bit short-sighted in a sense. Like I think if you would use O1 today for all your prompts, like you're wasting energy, basically. You're wasting compute. But I think to make a good comparison on complex tasks, like you need to compare it, like how quickly do you get to an answer on O1 versus GPT-4o? Because of GPT-4o, you're going to ask a lot of follow-up questions. So I think that is the only way to honestly compare the actual inference time.
That's true. And I also think that there are some tasks that for sure O1 is not going to be suited for, right? Like anything that you want fast response, O1 is already out of the picture, right? If you're going to have GitHub Copilot, so that's the coding assistant, right? But every time you want to get that autocomplete today, it takes like 6 seconds or whatever, then not sure, right? How fit it is for that.
True. Yeah.
So I think even like that by itself, my opinion is that O1 is not going to replace the GPT models. They are going to coexist, right?
And I think we might go towards like a one model that kind of just knows like, for this prompt, I don't need any thinking. I can just straight fire an answer. And for this more complex prompt, I'm going to trigger this reasoning procedure.
Yeah.
And I'm going to start reasoning about it and spend a bit more time on compute.
That makes sense. Yeah.
There was a project as well. I think I don't know if we covered this before. It's called, I think, LLM router. I don't know if it was exactly for that. I think it was more for like simple prompts. You give a very cheap LLM, and then for the more complex thing, you can take the.
Yeah, we touched upon it.
I think we touched upon this, right? And I think maybe it will be now models are not a machine learning model. Now it's a system, right? And in the end, it's like.
But they will probably merge together. GPT-4o1.
Right? You heard it here first. And they're gonna have like GPT 501 and then 5 or 602. You know, when they. It's gonna be a mess. And the router, I think from that project, I remember the LLM router was an LLM as well.
Yeah.
So it's LLMs all the way down, huh?
It's the future, man.
Yay. Very cool. Very cool. So you tried the O1, Bart, yourself?
I tried a bit, yeah.
Anything surprised you after reading the stuff? Like anything that was it as good as you thought? Was it not as good? Was it
This is very subjective, what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
But it was a very specific thing I was doing yesterday with a range of dates. I was using GPT-4o, a range of dates, and per date a description. We can ignore that. But there were, and it shouldn't have been there were duplicates in the dates. So there were overlapping ranges. Shouldn't be there, like based on the prompt, it shouldn't be there. And with GPT 4.0, I then prompted, yeah, but there are duplicates, please remove them. And then it didn't remove them.
It did not remove it.
Did not remove them. And I have the feeling, but it's very, like I said, this is very subjective, I'm going to say. This was not the case 6 months ago. I have the feeling that the performance was better because I've done this before. Very similar exercise. And I then did that in 01, and that worked.
So do you think they... No, not gonna. It's very conspiratory, you know. Like they bumped down the 4.0 performance.
Well, probably not specifically for this, but I think that discussion those rumors have been there before. That GPT-4 was decreased a bit in performance to free up compute. I mean, that's a bit the rumors that are going around.
Yeah,
I do sometimes have that feeling, but it's super hard to compare, because I also like you always. Like for this exercise I was doing now, like I've done exactly the same thing a few times before, so I know I can compare it a little bit. So I really have the feeling that the VR was better, but you also have this every time that something new is released, you also have this wow factor. I think the wow factor doesn't really hold up in terms of 6 months later how you remember it, like, and what it was actually right.
And I think also like if you're using ChatGPT, like the actual UI, there's the whole like temperature and all these things, right? So the responses are not really deterministic. There's some randomness to it, and it is possible that if it does the same thing 5 times, that one of them goes off, right? So so it's a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky to say these things, but are you is 01 your default after this? So
No.
actually the 01.
No, and it's also because it's not the default if you open ChatGPT.
I see.
And it doesn't support tools yet, so.
It doesn't support tools. Yeah. And it's more expensive, no? The 01?
I think it was a lot more expensive.
Yeah,
and,
right.
You also pay for the top tokens. I thought that was interesting,
Yeah.
because you have no control over these. You don't see them.
But you can scope them, I think, no? You can say, I max this much. You can put a window.
I didn't know.
But you're talking now about the API, right? Because in the ChatGPT UI,
that's true.
It's a fixed monthly price.
I think the API, because I didn't use it. I'm going off of what stuff I read. I guess it's the API. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, there's some other interesting things. For example, these benchmarks that they show are, of course, ones where it's very, very structured reasoning.
Yeah.
What do you mean by structured reasoning?
Yeah.
So these benchmarks, you mean?
Yeah.
I have on the screen now.
It's math, for example, where it's very clear, like this is a good step of reasoning, this is a bad step of reasoning. And so, of course, there's, again, some rumors about how they trained this. A while ago, they released a paper where they say they have a data set with 800,000 annotated reasoning steps. So they have a data set where with examples of reasoning steps, where each reasoning step is scored. Like, this is a good reasoning step. And probably they also have some bad reasoning steps as well. And the idea is probably that they use this in some way to train this. But of course, whatever was in that training step, in that training set, these type of reasoning things is something that the model might have picked up on, while other things it might not have picked up on.
But what do you mean by that by this? There's some things the model picked up and some things it didn't.
Yeah. So this mathematical reasoning, it's like a very, how should I say? Mathematical reasoning is very rigorous. Like, it's very structured. The same steps occur in different problems. And if that was part of the training set, it has seen these, it has learned these type of reasoning. So it can apply this type of reasoning at test time.
Yeah, I see.
And some people have said, like, okay, these benchmarks, but probably, you kind of trained it for these reasoning steps. And this is why people say there's big differences between certain domains, just because it has learned some type of reasoning, probably, or should take care with what I say. Learn to do reasoning, but it has learned to generate things that look like this type of reasoning, while not others.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So, for example, if I understand what you're saying correctly, is like in the training set, let's imagine there's a lot of math problems. So the model can say this is
the training set. There is even rumors that it comes from the Math Olympiads, right? The submissions. There's some rumors on. So these type of questions are very close to the benchmark direction.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. So it's a bit inflated as well. Like if you went even for something like maybe chemistry, which is
on.
Yeah. And there's the whole I mean, it's still science is still in theory is a bit more deterministic, right? I think once you go more to humanities, which there's still reasoning and logic, I think it would be even trickier, right?
Another point is it's very easy to verify these type of things. Like for math, we know the correct answer. So also,
Point,
again,
yeah.
rumors about how they would have trained this is they just let the LLM generate some things, some chain of thought, and they just, the chain of thoughts that give a good answer, they like feed these again into the LLM. While the bad ones can be discarded and the LLM can be told that this is wrong. So because we already know the answer, you already have another mechanism to store, to give feedback to the LLM.
Interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Maybe talking benchmarks.
Yes.
There's another link, which I think is an interesting thought exercise. But I don't know anything about the background.
This one?
Yeah, that one.
This one.
It's a post by
Bindu Ready.
Thank you. And I don't know anything about the specific test they did, but it's an IQ test result that they apparently do, I think, on a weekly basis on different models. And I don't know whether it's a verified test or whatever, right? But I think on average, most models still score quite high, right? 90 points on IQ test. And the O1 model apparently scores 120, which is
way better,
right?
So maybe for people that are just listening, this is like a normal distribution-ish thing, with the x-axis being the average IQ. 100 is like the middle, and then you see icons with all the different models typically to the left of the average, and then you only see O1 at the 120 mark. Actually, so this is maybe I feel like I should know by this point in my life, but IQ is like, people say, like, as a measurement of intelligence.
Yeah.
And I know there's like a test you can do for it, I guess.
Yeah.
But what are the questions actually like?
I think it also, you have different types of tests. I also think you have like
I also heard of emotional IQ. I also heard of different things, but like
these are from what I've never done. I've never taken the test myself, but I've like typical, like logical questions.
Logic.
Yeah, logic. And they're typically fine-tuned to regions as well. So they're
so like the questions are localized to whatever.
Yeah.
Like, so if you're asking Brazil, it's like you have 3 lions, and then 2 are running, you know, and then this, and the police comes. So it's like stuff like that. I see. Next question.
But they're validated on a geographical level. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. But what does this mean? If this is true, like it's, I don't know what to think about it.
Yeah,
this is of course like very specific questions, and probably questions that are very linked again to the question on which you did benchmarks, right? Logic questions. There's a clear right or no wrong answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I think IQ for me is a bit, because it means like you're trying to quantify intelligence. I think here, even when someone says with an IQ 120, AI is officially more intelligent, right? So really saying like, if it's 120, you have an IQ higher than most people, therefore you're more intelligent. But even for me to say like, what does that mean?
For me, it's also difficult to say. Also, without knowing any details of what's behind this, I don't know. It's a cool.
I mean, it's an interesting,
cool idea.
Also, one thing I was coding pair programming kind of with someone that was more junior and used Copilot quite a lot.
Okay,
it was a very interesting exercise because I can see how there was a lot of code. There's a lot of stuff. Code worked for some cases. Like they had some, you know, it worked for that. At one point I said, like, before I even looked at the code, it's like, let's make sure it passes all these linting rules.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And then, okay, they have documentation, all these things. But then I realized how my most of the times my feedback was like, why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense. Why you have that function? This doesn't make sense. Why are you doing this? And I think it's like these AI models things, it makes it very easy to write code, to create stuff. But the question that, like, more the question of why you're doing this, you know, should you create a new function or should you modify this function that already exists? These things that AI doesn't help with. And then I realized that like there were functions that are almost duplicated. You know, it's just that one is has an input with a table. The other one is to read a CSV path. And it's like, well, why don't you just add an argument, you know? And I think maybe that's where the skills, like, or like that we're gonna have to move towards a bit, you know, is like what kind of prompts you need to ask, but not how to write it in itself. Or maybe like, yeah, maybe how to write it is good to understand as well. But yeah, like, and when I think of these things, is like, yeah, O1 can probably write all the code that was there. But if someone did all these things, would I say, oh yeah, that person is super intelligent? Not sure, right? I think it's like there's a thing about designing or what things actually need to be there, or I don't know, you're writing something and it's like, oh, now I need Spark. Okay, I'm gonna write a function for Spark. Oh, now I need CSV. Okay, I'm gonna write a new function for CSV. Oh, and then maybe you should take a step back and think like, why am I doing all these things? Or maybe you have an edge case and then you write a function to catch that edge case, or more code to write that edge case, and you have another edge case, and then you're like, well, I have so many edge cases, maybe my premise is wrong.
But it's also because today how you use Copilot is probably very much prompted as in, I want to create this function for reading CSVs, for example. That's how you use it today. But if you would have a bit more, let's say, if you would have the full code base in your context, if you have a bit more reasoning and you ask this, maybe you should be challenged. Like, are you sure you want to create this function?
Yeah.
Because I already see this in this file, so that
True.
maybe we see in the future that Copilot can become a bit more of your pair programmer, right? Which it is not today. Today it is your monkey that writes code for you.
Yeah, I also think, no, I completely agree. I also think that I'm a bit thrown off by big face right there.
The camera automatically zoomed in on Marilla.
Go figure. But so that for sure. I definitely think that oh wow, now I'm not even on the frame. I definitely think that that's a thing, like to question, like, do you need this? But even things like, it's so easy to write code that there should be some pushback, you know, like, let's write a function to dynamically generate these dates.
And
but then
basically
for me,
what you're saying is LLMs are still dumb.
It's, I guess it's like, what do you call dumb, right? It can do a lot of stuff, but like the critical questions, it doesn't ask, it doesn't think, right? Like it doesn't, like if you can, you can create a function to generate dates dynamically, but why would you do that? Wouldn't it be better for someone to put them manually?
But
like,
maybe that's, if we would apply O1 to your coding assistant, maybe you would get this.
Maybe, who knows? But it'd take a while.
Yeah, for me, this whole discussion comes very close to what happens in chess. I don't know whether it has been discussed before, but in chess, we had humans, they beat the computers. At some point, computers became better and better and better at playing chess. So the computers won. The computers were better. And then there came this new hybrid where there were people that were actually going to use computers, and the people were doing more planning, high level, but they still use the computers to actually think about very deep strategy. And at some point, these hybrid, so people using computers, were actually better than the computer itself. And so it's again a bit, so these people that used those computers, they was not chess masters. So it was a completely different, or a different skill set than, the real chess masters. And it feels like we're going to something towards this. So we have the real hardcore programmers that can do it all on themselves, but then to actually being able to use the tool is again some other kind of skill set. And if you use the tool correctly, you might be able to do better than just only letting the tool write the code.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, in the end, like, it's interesting, but like when you look at it like that, it's like, it's a tool.
It's a tool,
right? That's
which requires a specific skill set.
Which requires specific skill set, and it's
to use effectively.
And it's a very powerful tool. Like it does a lot of stuff, but in the end of the day, it's a tool, right? So I think when you talk about intelligence, sometimes for me, that's kind of what I think is like, it can do a lot. It can answer all these questions really well, but what about asking the right question? I haven't seen that yet, right? And maybe that's, I mean, not saying we're not going to get there, like maybe we will, but
I think this is a move towards that.
I think a move towards that, indeed.
Yeah.
The introspection. And one other thing I remember, I think you showed me this part. I don't know if we talked on the podcast, that one way you can actually test your LLMs is the self-reflection, which basically you ask the model in the next, like, so you ask something, it gives an answer, and they can say, was your answer good or was it just BS? And then a lot of times it could actually detect its own hallucinations, right? Which I would imagine that with a chain of thought, this happens way less.
Yeah.
Right, because it's almost like that's built in.
This building.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that we didn't discuss yet, but there's like another improvement that people are speculating that might be in there, and that is that the model might not be just generating one stream of tokens. It might be, this is speculation, so maybe a bit of context. It has been shown that if you take an LLM and you generate multiple answers randomly, even on questions where you don't always get the same answer, the answer is in the LLM somewhere. So you can retrieve it, but because it samples one word, you have to choose randomly one of the possible words. You sample the next word. But of course, whatever you picked as the first word will influence the options for the second word. So we call this a probability distribution, and it's super, super complex. But by following the chain of thought or the token process once, you just generate one sample, one result. While the LLM actually defines a very, very big space of possible results. If you just would have picked the first 3 words different, your answer could have been completely different. So where it goes is that maybe in this O1 model, there might be such a mechanism. So the easiest way such a mechanism could exist is just call the LLM 4 or 5 times, look at all of these answers, and pick the one that looks the best.
Or what if you did like a RAG thing? Like you generate 5 things and then you say, from these answers, give me the best, like it's a bit like I just say stuff. Yeah, I feel like I just say stuff, but I have no idea if anything holds, right? Like, it's like you can have all these ideas, but then you try to code, it's like, it doesn't work. That doesn't work. So it's
very interesting to read about.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff, and I do think it's very refreshing that people are still thinking of, even though I don't know if it's a new architecture, right? There was a bit discussion with the Mamba stuff, but I think it's still nice that the people are still thinking about it. They're not just saying let's just scale. There's some thought going into it as well.
No, they're really trying. Like another fun quote is like, it's still a stochastic parrot, but this stochastic parrot can fly higher than the previous one.
True.
And it's just because of these kind of new ideas and concepts that we have applied. And true, it's still an LLM. We have not solved a lot of the fundamental problems there, but at least we figured out a step to get further on some domains, right? Still not clear on all domains. And it's through these little incremental steps that we might kind of give a way to a completely new architecture that will solve maybe some of these fundamental problems.
True. So is there maybe, I don't know if I can wrap it up. I'm not sure if there's a lot more you would like to. Anything else? Because
no, but I agree with what Jonas is saying. I think the discussion is there anything really new here?
Yes.
It's probably not at a fundamental level, but they've found a way to build a system around it, and which also shows that today we have a performance on some specific set of tests that is way, way, way higher than anyone imagined a year ago. So I think there's definitely progress.
Indeed, and that's what I also wanted to circle back. I think I asked, like, is this an innovation? Is this a new thing? I also think that in reality, right, there's not like one person that just breaks the glass. Usually it's like very small steps, at one point, for some reason, like even neural networks in the 1900s, they're already there, right? But they weren't as popular. The BERT stuff, the GPT even, used from years ago, right? So I feel like sometimes we have this perception that this is a huge breakthrough, and it is, but it's not it's not a breakthrough in the sense that all these things are new. It's just that this was applied in a different way. Maybe there's a little thing that changed, and this really kind of almost like a butterfly effect, like that little change that really broke everything out. I do think it's very innovative, even if it is just applying old ideas, because actually the one thing that I hear back again and again is the reinforcement learning and chain of thought. So the reinforcement learning, like being out the LLM, the model, right, output something and people kind of say this is good, this is not good, right? So I think it's human reinforcement learning, I think, or something, human feedback.
Yeah, that's what they used before.
Yeah, which is what appears that they used here as well with the chain of thought, as you explained. But I think to do this at a scale, to do this, like, I definitely think it is, and I think they should get credit for it.
Yeah, and this is what I think is, you also see this in anthropic research and these kind of they have big company, they have lots of resources. And what you see is that they really add to the total body of research, not necessarily by coming up with new ideas, but like validating these ideas on a very large scale, like that your typical research group might not have.
True. So we all agree that it's a innovation.
I think so.
What do you think, Bart?
It is definitely in the innovation. Incremental innovation.
Incremental innovation. Cool. I think we have time for at least one more topic. I see there's something from Moody here. I have no idea what this is, Bart, but it's afraid to click
Oh,
on
it was a
this.
topic I thought that it would be interesting for you.
You thought, okay, curious, huh? You got my attention, huh? Let's see what it is.
You typically bring these type of topics.
Let's see. The article here that I put on the screen for people following the live stream is Greppability is an underrated code metric. What is this about? What is Greppability, Bart?
Do you know what grep is?
It's the CLI, the bash thing, right?
Yeah.
So
you're-
usually
you're maybe too young for it. So grep is
Say
where you
more.
say it's a CLI tool where you can say grep and then so wait, let me rephrase. You have a file and you want to grab that for a certain word. So you want to basically search, show me the part of the file where this word occurs.
Yes.
How easy is it to find a line of code? Basically, that's what the title says. Like, and that metric of how easy is it to find a line of code, maybe we should think about it.
Okay. You got my attention. Say more.
And there they give some examples, and it didn't go through it really in depth. But like, don't make identifiers too dynamic. So let's say if something is about shipping, like they give an example of shipping address versus a billing address. Don't make the address type dynamic, but explicitly mention shipping and billing.
Okay.
So that you can also search for it, grab for it. So you can find, okay, we're doing something here with the shipping address.
Okay.
Like these type of things. Make it easy to retrieve what you're doing where.
But then it's really just for, it's really to find that line of code later, or
Literally, yeah.
it's just for that.
Grabbing is finding a line of code.
Yeah, but I just thought that I was just
be
wondering.
explicit, like the example we were giving. We were discussing with the CSV reader function.
Yeah.
Like call it the CSV reader function.
Yeah.
Like don't call it this read file function.
I see.
Right? Like it reads a CSV.
But what if it's not? What if it's just what it can be filed with different extensions? Would it be better to have a underscore CSV function and underscore parquet function, or would it be better to have one? And
well, this is a good example. Like probably like yeah, if you would combine in one function or two functions, doesn't really matter. But for this purpose, but like if you support both CSV and parquet, make that explicit in your code. Like if it's a .csv, then do this. If it's a .parquet, then do that.
I see.
And it takes a little bit of the magic out of your code, but it makes it very easy to makes it maybe a little bit more extensive in the amount of lines of code that you write, but it makes it much more easy to find.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think
What
also, I think I heard it from Linus Torvalds, the Linux guy, that he actually said that good code, like code should be boring to read.
Yeah.
You know, like you should just be like, yeah, okay, okay. You shouldn't be like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah.
Whoa, this is crazy, yo.
Yeah.
Like it should really be like, yeah. And I think it's something that I'm very curious to see if things work. So sometimes I want to try, but then sometimes I actually read it back. It's like, yeah, this is, I don't think people can, like, I don't think I would understand this in a month.
I really like to write recursive functions.
Yeah.
But it's not easy to understand, right?
Yeah, I know. So I think I definitely hear what you're saying. I do think it's something to keep in mind. Because I do think sometimes people try to be so smart that is like you're too smart and no one understands. Like not even you from a month from now.
Yeah.
Right.
But at the same time, at the end of the day, you think, oh yeah, but you built something really cool.
Yeah, indeed. I think it's like sometimes I do that. Like I write something and I'm like, I'm really happy with it. I was like, oh, like this is crazy. I'm really using all the niche things of Python here. And then I come back a month, I'm like or maybe I write a comment that is like bigger than the function, you know, it's like really trying to explain. It was like,
But
yeah,
at
I'm
least
not
you
sure.
write a comment because
Yeah, that's true. But then I'm also wondering, like, if I have this big comment, like maybe I'm not doing it right, you know? Like if I have to explain it, that like again, if the code is boring and it's almost just like reading English, right? If you need to explain it, then maybe it's too complicated, right? I don't know. I mean, sometimes you do need to be complicated, but I'm not sure. What do you think about this?
yeah, I was to challenge it maybe a bit because some code practices like Java object-oriented programming, you would they say explicitly do not do this because you do not want to define up front that you will be able to read the CSV, that you'll be able to read the parquet.
If you have like a base class or something. Or...
Yeah. They kind of say you don't have to specify this. You use this with you solve this with subclassing, such that up front you just have a file reader, and later if I want to add another file reader, I'll make a subclass of that parquet file reader and another file reader, CSV file reader. But in the class that uses that file reader, you have no clue what is being, what kind of file readers are supported. But that's by design because you want to keep it super flexible.
So but I think, even then, in that case, there would still be another piece of the code that would specify later.
I don't think this would exclude this approach, right? Like you can still be explicit in the implementation of the of your base reader class, right?
That's true.
Yes.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I guess for me, it's like I never ran into a code that I had a bug and I'm like, I can't find that line. I mean, maybe it happened actually, like more in GitHub repos or something that I'm looking for stuff.
A code base that you don't know. That's where I typically encounter it.
I think so. I think it's like if there is I don't know, I have an issue with a package and then I want to find where something is on GitHub because I don't want to pull it and do this and that or whatever. If I already don't have it on my side packages and stuff, then I think it is more relevant. But never really thought of refactoring my code because of that. No,
but I think it's a bit in two directions. Like if you write good code or explicit code that's easy to understand, it will probably be greppable. And if you optimize for greppability, it will probably also be quite readable. Like
that's what I was
connection there.
That's what I was thinking. I'm thinking if that's true. Because for example, if you have I don't know. Because there's for example, if you think of greppability and you think of dry, right? That don't repeat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think I saw it even here in this article at some point. It looks nice and dry, but for maintenance, right? So it's like I feel like there's some things that kind of conflict a bit, right? Because if you're more explicit and you're more this, then maybe you're repeating yourself a bit and maybe doing that. I'm not saying that everything should be dry, right? There's no like golden rule like you have to do this. But I'm not sure. I'm going to think about that to see if that's true. One thing that I have thought, and I even thought of doing like a presentation about this, and this is kind of how I approach code. Like my only, and I'm maybe being a bit clickbaity, right? Like the only thing I care about when I'm writing code, what makes a good code or not, is how much stuff you have to keep in your brain when you're reading it. And I think the less things you need to keep, if you have to keep little things in your brain to understand to read and understand what it does, then it's good code. And I think it's a thing that is vague enough that you don't make any absolute truths, but I do think it helps me to think about this, right? Like, so if you have something that is a bit dynamic and you don't repeat yourself, so it's less, you don't have to keep track of two things at one time, less things in your brain, great. But if it's something that is so complex that you have to go and look for other stuff other places, then I think it's too much. I think that's, I mean, you can talk about dry, you can talk even the Zen of Python, like explicit is better than implicit. I think it all kind of boils down to this. That's the only thing you need to remember. Just try to make your code so you have to keep the least amount of things in your brain.
It relates a bit to modularity of the code, right? Like you want to have like independent pieces, and if you're in such a piece, you only have to think about that piece.
Indeed. But I think, again, for me, like this is, for me, I translate all of that to, if your code is good, it keeps less things on your brain.
I think there's a nice summary.
Yeah,
nice goal.
Then I want to do. I'm thinking of doing a presentation about this too, like how, because like there's always context and some stuff context you need to be. That's why I think Pydantic, for example, is really good, because basically parsing JSON and dictionaries, you need to know the keys, you need to know this. But if you have a class, you have the IDE that helps you, so you don't need to keep that in your brain. If you're using Pydantic, you have type hints, which is a context that you probably already have because you're a Python developer, right? So you have to keep less things in your brain. You don't have like specified like C types or whatever, right? Or Cython types and all these things. So the less things, and maybe you need to learn Pydantic, which is true. right? So it is something you need to keep in your brain. But if you can reduce that as much as possible, that's how you make your code better. That's the premise of the talk. So that's why global variables, I don't think they're good unless it's something like pi, which is a constant everyone knows, because it's again context that you should already have. But if you just have a variable like foo, like all caps foo in the beginning of your file, and then you see this popping up in the middle of your function, and you're like, wait, what is this? And you have to go back. Something else you need to keep in your brain, you know. So I have a lot of arguments, and I think when I was in that experience that I was reviewing someone else's code, I was trying to motivate why I think that this is better than that, and I think I kind of came back to this, like, keep less things in your brain.
That's interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Yeah,
So-
using it in that way.
So I'm planning to. I think I'm gonna. What do you think? You think I should
I think
elaborate
you
on
should do
this?
it.
You should do it. Okay, I'll do it. Roots conf.
That's good.
I'll try to come up with something.
Noted.
I feel like every time I tell Bart something, it's like I signed it, you know, because I know that tomorrow's gonna be like, oh, how's that talk going? You know, like,
But I
everybody
think
decides on it.
it's a very interesting one. Like,
And I
it's,
think it goes
I-
beyond
I
as
fully agree.
well.
Like you have tons of best practices, but why do you want to do it? Is because you want to keep less things in your brain. Like,
And a lot of
why
the-
do you use a formatter? Because you don't want to make it a concern.
Exactly. Why? And I think, in a lot of these principles, I've seen people saying like, yeah, but it needs to be dry. It's like, okay, but now I'm making this function so dynamic and so this. Like, no, like, and I think there's always a little star next to the principles. But I do think that keeping less things in your brain, I haven't seen exceptions yet. I think this, for me, has been a very good guiding metric so far.
So you're gonna do a presentation on this, and then afterwards a book.
Yes.
Nothing in my brain. By
No.
Miguel.
Yes, be like on my tombstone, you know. But I do think it even goes beyond Python, right? Is it programming,
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
right? So,
agree.
like, yeah, I can go on and on. Huh? Like pandas, there's like 5 different ways to do the same thing. It's not good.
But it doesn't necessarily match with best practice in all languages.
Yeah.
Like, for example, so in Go, there is a movement to say you need to use very short variable names for some stuff, like, or even like 2-letter variable names. It's not very explicit, right?
Mhm.
You need to keep it in your brain. But like,
True. But do you agree with that?
well, that's something else. But
Because to
what
me-
I'm trying to say is like that does not necessarily match with all best practices. But I think it's a fair overarching
But I think
goal.
if we had a conversation and you say, like, you're reviewing my Go code and you say, why, like, instead of putting birth date, just put X. And I'll say, no, I don't want to do that because it's more thing I need to remember. What would you say to that?
Well,
You would agree
personally.
Okay.
Personally,
Yeah.
probably say birth date.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'll work on it.
Cool.
I was a bit on the fence, but I think now
I'll submit it for you.
thanks.
Maybe we can do a hot take.
Let's do a hot take. Can you do the hot, Alex?
This
Thank
is when
you.
Murilo took a slice of pizza. Just came out of the oven.
Just to actually fun
It was a funny evening.
fun story. When I was young, like really young, my mom tells this story. I don't remember, but she said that, like, she said, don't touch the stove. It's really hot. And when I was a kid, like, I don't know if you've had milk or something, you taste with, like, you put in your mouth, right? So I put the tongue in the oven, and it burned my tongue, and I never did it again. That was I don't remember, but
That is what it took for you not to put your tongue in the oven.
yes. Actually, I mean, be surprised, but I was a very stubborn child. So yeah.
Okay.
So every time I hear the hot, I'll think of that now. So
Same for me now.
cool. So we have well, you want to go with yours, Bart, the one that you put here.
We can.
You're the boss.
But it's a bit of a sensitive one, I think, especially for you.
Let's do it. Let's see it.
I think you are a major fan of pre-commit.
I'm
And
a fan.
I will say pre-commit is very overrated. But maybe you need to explain a bit what pre-commit is.
So pre-commit. When you're working with Git, if you want to save quote unquote changes, it's like making a commit, very simplistically speaking. So what you can do, you can have these pre-commit hooks, which a hook is basically a piece of code that runs before something happens. So in this case, it's before a commit. So whenever you say, so, and I'm making analogies here, right? If I want to save a file, before saving that file, run this program that checks if the file has any white space. And if it does have white space, it won't let you save. It won't let you commit, right? So it can be things like that. In practice, what happens is that the pre-commit hooks, they try to modify a file. And if the files are modified, it won't commit, but then you can also see what changes were made, right? So if you have linters like black or rough and all these things, you can do that. And basically at every commit, it will format the file for you. So that's, what do you think of this? Is this a good explanation? I don't know if then, for you to place your hot take, I don't know if that's a good enough explanation. What do you think?
So it's a set of tools that you define that you say, these are things that before doing the actual commit, you want to run.
Yes.
On your code base.
Yes.
And maybe you should also explain how these tools, like a format or how are they installed?
So you want the virtual environment stuff.
Yeah.
So, so there is a package called pre-commit that's written in Python. The thing with Python is that it's an interpreted language, right? So that means that if you want to install a package for your project, you have to make sure that it's isolated, right? If I want to install pandas for a project that I'm doing now, but then in a month from now, there's a new version of pandas, I want to be able to have a different version for that other project, right? Pre-commit packages, a lot of times they're written in Python, which means that if you were to install in your project, now that is a dependency of your project. And maybe there are conflicts as well, right? So maybe if I want to install black depended on Tomly, which is was an external package. Now it's built into Python. And maybe I have Tomly with a different version. So maybe there's a clash. So what pre-commit does is that for each hook, it creates a separate environment for that. Does that...
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I feel like I've been like, how do you say? Like signing my death certificate, you know?
You've been setting the stage
for Bart. It's like if I'm a volleyball player, I'm setting for him. And he's just gonna...
So I think it's nice as a tool, right?
Okay.
Where you say, okay, this is a set of tools that I typically use. Please run them for me. And maybe even as a tool that you can share with the team that is working on the code base.
Okay.
But the fear I have is that it's becoming a bit the standard for CI, which I don't think is a correct one. Because you have these pre-commit tests, a lot of them, I think the source of truth, like is this okay, should not be in the pre-commit, but should be in GitHub Actions or whatever your CI environment is. How would you, so, and if you say that, then pre-commit becomes a bit double accounting, because you need to do this in your pre-commit, you need to do this in your CI, you need to keep these things up to date.
Yeah, so I see what, well, so that's
you need to make sure that you're doing the same test in your pre-commit than that you're doing in your CI environment.
Yeah, so I think that's, well, and your argument is that the source of truth, let's say, should be in the CI, not in the pre-commit, not in this random package that you're using locally. Yeah, I see your point. What I do today, and what I'll probably continue doing, is to run, so pre-commit is a package, and you can actually run that in your CI. You can do pre-commit to run all hooks.
You can, as long as, but
yes,
this is actually why I'm bringing this up. It is super hard to do that when you're using when you're testing in your CI, and I'm talking GitHub Actions now, just to make it very. When you're using GitHub Actions, you have a matrix environment, and we want to run against multiple different Python versions.
Okay.
And you're using Rye, then pre-commit doesn't work. You need to do a lot of custom stuff to get the right Python versions installed, etc.
Interesting.
And it's very hard to debug that because you don't really know what's going on, because pre-commit then creates its own virtual environments, and everything is running in another virtual environment, and you're not sure which Python version is actually using.
So what you're saying is, so if something goes wrong,
and then you get into the discussion like maybe you should not do a matrix Python test in your GitHub Actions, maybe because you can also in your pre-commit run against multiple Python versions.
Yeah.
You can say
You can specify it as well. In
You
the
can
pre-commit,
specify
only
it
use
in-
312.
or multiple ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never used it, but I
It's
guess you could.
possible,
Yeah.
but it makes it, in my eyes, very, very intransparent on what Python version am I actually
But
testing against.
what I have done is that I have 2 CI jobs, one for linting and one for testing and all these things.
Sure.
Why wouldn't you do that instead of running all the hooks with different Python versions? Like, why do you need to run the hooks with multiple Python versions?
And you're saying the linting is fine to do with one Python version.
Yeah, I think depends on the hooks you have. So then again, then we get a bit specific to your project.
Mhm.
But like if it's like checking if there's white space, I think it's fine. If it's checking like black rules, like single quotes, double quotes, it's fine. I think only if you get to the more, but even the things that like, even if you have like the typing, for example, now you have, I think after 3 point something.
But why make it something extra that needs to be in your mind? Because you're setting up a Python version.
He's using my words against me. See how he
Yeah,
did there?
yeah, but
This
It is
is
as
why I
well.
wouldn't. But this is like you're saying, okay, I have this Python package. I'm gonna test this against Python 10. Or gonna run it against 3.10. Let's say something random, right?
Yeah.
Okay, then I need to make sure that my pre-commits, I want to make sure that I test the same Python version because I don't want to have any side effects. Maybe something changed, even if it's just a format, or maybe something changed. So I need to specify that in my pre-commit hooks. That also needs to 3.10. Why make it an extra complexity?
But I guess for me, it's like, so you're right. So this is for packages, right? Because if you're testing across multiple Python versions, it's probably a package,
Yeah, exactly.
right? If it's an application, there's no need to test for multiple. Just test for the environment that you're going to run in.
Not necessarily. But
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're writing code and your local environment is going to be in a Python version. So 3.10, for example.
Yeah.
Like if in 3.10 you don't have the pipe for union types,
Yeah.
you're going to write union whatever, right? That's the file. That's going to be the same. So the pre-commit hooks, the linting and all these things
But
should be run with
why?
3.10.
Because you're saying, you are explaining like pre-commit, it creates a virtual environment per tool, because there might be a clash with your Python package, which is very, very much an edge case, right? Let's be very honest, very much an edge case. So what you're doing, even if you discuss locally, you have this Python virtual environment in which you run your project, and next to that you have potentially tens of different other virtual environments that might be the same Python version or might not be, but might create side effects, might not be, not do that. Why create extra complexity?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree. First, I'm not sure if I fully agree with the clashes because
the alternative is just to install them as dev dependencies, right? And just have a script that calls these.
you could do that. Yeah,
Run, whatever.
you could do that. I think the thing is like for every
I do
dependency
that.
you have, yeah, you can do that. But for every dependency you have, then you have all the dependencies of that dependency as well. And I think if you have something like black or something that is C based, it's fine. But then you're actually bringing a lot of other dependencies as well, and then you could have clashes.
But this is a very far off, like potentially in the future there
I
might
think
be.
I had issues with it. That's the thing. Like with DataBooks, I was
But
using.
is it worth the extra things that you need to keep in mind?
But that's the thing. So, well, I think then it's a trade-off of keeping things in mind. Like if that's my guiding rule, because I think in one hand is like you have to remember that in CI, there you have 2 jobs. That's the way I would think of it. One is for linting the actual files. So anything that actually changes the files is one job, and everything that is testing across multiple targets is another job, right? It has worked. I never had issues with this. Let's just say that. And then, yeah, if there are issues, then you have to remember all the context of virtual environments and isolated environments, and that's the thing. Otherwise, if you bring it to your dev dependencies, then you have to remember that these dependencies may also impact these other things. So if you say there's a clash because of this and that, you have to remember that you're using this dependency because you're running this linting hook, and you're still using pre-commit to run your local dependencies, your local dev dependencies there as well. Like it's a different setup that you also have to keep in mind, right? Because even the pre-commit package, it's not set up for doing it that way, right? Like if you look at the CI, the pre-commit hooks that you have today, and you run stuff locally, you have to say pass file names true or false, right? And you have to know that for PyTest, you don't pass file names. And what does that mean? You have to know what kind of file types you have. You have to know what the difference between local and Python. You know, I feel like and maybe it is because the way that the tool is set up, But I do think there's a lot of stuff you need to keep in mind if you're using it the way you're proposing.
What is the way I'm proposing?
So having everything as a dev dependency, well, maybe I don't know if that's the way you're proposing now.
Not the only thing I'm saying is pre-commit should not be the be all end all of CI. I think CI should be separate. You should do it within your project context, and maybe you create a virtual environment for a specific tool if you need it. But I think it creates a lot of extra complexity and a lot of hidden things that you're doing if the default in your CI is just to run your pre-commit.
I think that's the main point, that it's hidden, that it's...
But hidden in the sense that there's a virtual environment for each tool.
Yeah, but if you don't know about how this tool works, you might just think, I'm going to run rough here.
Yeah.
And just say, because it's very easy. You copy-paste something from the rough, whatever they propose. You copy-paste it in your pre-commit, and you put it in your CI, but you might not really know what's going on behind the scenes.
But then isn't it like a trade-off? Because in one, you're doing it kind of yourself because you have dev dependencies.
Let's take as a very concrete example.
Mm-hmm.
You're running rough against your code base.
Yes.
In a GitHub Actions.
Okay.
In a matrix test, so you put in your GitHub Actions, you're setting a Python first for 3.9 and 3.10 and 3.11 and 3.12. I'm running my pre-commit there because you define my pre-commit rough hook. You're thinking to yourself, oh, I'm using these versions, but you're actually not, because in your pre-commit hook you specified it's 3.9 or whatever, and it's always going to be 3.9.
But so I'm not sure if that's a good example, because I think even rough, because rough is for changing the files, right? So again, maybe rough is going to say you shouldn't use union, you should use the pipe. But rough cannot say that because for the 3.12 you will have the pipe operator for union types, and for 3.8 you're not going to have it, and you cannot change the file twice. You should have that. Like if you wrote it thinking of 3.10, you have to use the 3.10 linting.
You're gonna assume, unless you know about if it in your brain about pre-commit, you're gonna assume that you're running rough within the Python version you're testing at that point. But you're actually not, because there's a hidden virtual environment in which there is a specific Python version that you specified in your commit setup. Pre-commit setup.
I'm not sure I would think that. Because to me, it's like, again, if you're changing rough for that target or this target, then for me, I wouldn't want it to do it for multiple environments. So that's why probably I wouldn't even put in the same job.
That's even more weird. Why would you not want a format or a type check or whatever to test that in the version that is actually relevant to you?
Because when you're writing something, you're writing with a certain, like, I'm writing 3.8 code or whatever, right? Like that's the thing I'm writing on the thing. And there are some features that are available in 3.10 that are not available in 3.8. Like Tomly, for example, is a good example. Tomly, I think it came into Python on 3.11. So after 3.11, I don't have to pip install Tomly. I have to, it's like, one I can do import tomlib, and on the other one I have to import Tomly. Right? There's a built-in package that after 3.11, it became part of the standard library. But when I'm writing the code, I have to write the code thinking of the Python version that I have. And linting should also be in that vein, right? There are some features that are available in 3.12 that are not available in 3.11, 3.10, 3.8. What's the name of the type? No, match case, whatever. That's also available in 3.11. So if you're writing something for 3.10, you cannot use that at all. Unless you do import future, whatever, because that's something's built afterwards. But you know what I'm saying? Like when you're writing code, you have to write thinking of a Python version, and linting should also be in that Python version. And we're talking just about linting, yeah? And I think there's a bigger argument if you talk about, if you run PyTest on your pre-commit. If there are other things you could do, right? But for linting, I don't...
PyTest is even much more.
PyTest is much more. Yeah, PyTest is much more. Huh? But I think there are other things you could do, and I think maybe it's a bit case by case for us to discuss.
But I think even linting, like type hinting, for example.
Yeah.
Like type hinting is optional, right?
Yes.
You want to get hints based on, let's say, linting hints, tips from your linter based on the version that they're testing against. Because there are a lot of things that are backwards compatible, right? But you want to make it up to speed with the latest version.
So the way I approach it is like you take the lowest version that you have, and that's what you use. But for example, capital L list.
Even if we ignore all this, that there are multiple versions, if you would do it like this and you say, just say we set up Python 3.12 in GitHub Actions.
Yeah.
I also have my pre-commit. There is a possibility that you didn't update your pre-commit to 3.12.
That is true.
I mean, let's keep it as simple as that. There's a hidden context.
That is true. That is true. But then I think it's like, and again, I'm not saying that. I think I agree that the pre-commit CI is not, wow, this is perfect. I do think it's the best tool that we have. I think it's the one that makes my life the easiest. And maybe it is additional context, but I already have it in my brain. For me, this is normal.
Yeah. I think what I'm trying to say, I'm also trying a bit to make an argument here. And to me, in my CI pipeline, I wanted to be very explicit. What is it that I value in my CI? And just please run all my pre-commit tests, which is basically what you're saying, is not explicit in the pipeline because you don't see in the pipeline at all what it's doing because it's just running all your pre-commits. So it's not explicit in the CI. And there's also in your CI a hidden context because there are different virtual environments.
Yeah, I see what you're
I'm
saying.
saying like the CI needs to be explicit, so don't use pre-commit as a wrapper to do that.
I see what you're saying. So,
but you can still use it as a tool locally, right?
But like, if I understand what you're saying is like, you think it will be better, so people keep less things in their brain if they go to your CI and they read it and they know what's happening. And with pre-commit, now you have to go on the project. Now you have to go to pre-commit files. So there's more context that you need to know, which I agree with the argument. On the other hand, for me, the reason why I started doing this is because I had to keep less things in my head in the sense that I had something on my pre-commit hooks and I know it's going to run the CI. I know it's going to run everywhere. I don't have to make sure it's in multiple places. So in that sense, I keep less things in my head. And that's why I opted for that.
You are sure that it's consistent?
I'm sure it's consistent. I'm sure it's not going to impact, like, I'm sure I'm not going to have a weird NumPy sub-dependency there because I have this hook or something, like it's not, like I have some, not guarantees because things can always break, but it's like, I have this there. I know it's not going to mess up with the rest of my project. I know I can change versions very easily here. I change it here. It also goes on the CI. For me, it did keep less things in my head. And also because the pre-commit package, the way it's set up, if you want to do something custom, it's not as easy. Like you have the fail, you have the pass file names, you have a local and a Python thing argument for the language, which to me, even today, it's not 100% clear, So maybe if those things were different, maybe I'll have a different opinion as well. But I think today that I do agree there is a bit of context you need to get. And I think if you're in the CI, you need to know that the CI is using pre-commit. You need to know what pre-commit is. You need to know this. But for me, it's something that it has helped me, Because even the things like, you can do pipex. You can do pipex install black, and you can run black there. But to me, it's like, if I'm going to do that, why don't I just have it on the CI, on the pre-commit, and I have a virtual environment that they're separate.
But that I agree.
Right?
I agree.
Because I also saw all these other tools like, because you have pipex and you have rough pipex this and do that. And it's like, you can do brew install black, It's like, what the fuck, And it's like, well, if I just have it there, it's just easier. It's just like what I want to run is there. So,
Yeah, when starting this podcast, I was a bit worried that I would go too deep into 01, but
we found a way. Cool. Interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Interesting discussion indeed. So I think with that, it's time.
It is.
It is time. Maybe what are you guys planning to do the next weekend? How's your looking ahead? I'm not sure if it's too abrupt. I wanted to wrap it up.
Next week is still so far away.
It is a bit far away now. But
let me finish up. Past weekend, I read the Phoenix project.
You did?
On DevOps.
Nice.
And I know DevOps, but it was still very, very interesting to read just to see what the original thought behind it, what the original problem was, because we don't see it anymore. True. Like DevOps is usually there. We don't see this big separation between dev and operations anymore. So it was very interesting to read about a context that originally developed it. And it actually gave me like a deeper understanding of all of these concepts.
And I think it's also well written. Like, I think it really captivates you. It's very action based. I also read the Unicorn project. It's like the guy wrote it afterwards. Not as good, but it's still.
It's a follow-up?
It's not a follow-up.
Never read it.
The guy wrote it after the Phoenix project.
Okay.
But the stories technically they overlap.
Okay.
But it's not. I thought the Phoenix project was better, but still interesting. Still a good read.
Yeah, and it's very niche. It's written for us kind of people. Which,
Exactly. It's for me, like to Murillo.
yeah, but it's like when you read about all of these crises, these fire moments, you really feel it because you know how bad this is. Well, yeah, that's not for everybody.
Yeah,
I couldn't give this book to my sister and say, "Look, this is a good
This
book."
is great. You should read it. It's like, oh, cool. So next weekend you're gonna read the Unicorn Project.
I don't know.
You should also read The Goal. It's the Goal. The Goal is, I think it's about manufacturing.
Yeah.
But the guy even mentioned that the Phoenix project was a bit inspired by this.
Yeah. They mention it in the book.
Yeah, so I read that one too. It's nice. Cool. What about you, Bart?
Next weekend.
Yeah.
I don't know yet.
You don't know yet?
Nothing special planned.
Okay. I don't know either what I'm gonna do. But I don't know. I wasn't fishing for you to ask me. I don't know what I'm gonna do either.
No, I'm trying not to have too much planned.
That's good. That's a good plan.
Yeah.
That's a good plan to not have too much plan. What about you, Alex?
I also don't have
No idea.
too
Okay.
soon.
Okay. Maybe one piece of exciting news before we wrap up. Not for the podcast. I think we're looking into bringing some external guests.
Yes.
Every once in a while. So you're still gonna see the usual bandits. But every once in a while, maybe once a month, but to be seen. No commitments there yet. To bring someone external, do a deep dive. People from the community, from the data and AI community.
Package
So,
maintainer, product founder.
yeah. So if
It's
anyone has
something.
any suggestions, thoughts, anything that anyone that you think would be a good fit, feel free to send it our way. Yeah, to be seen. Let's see how it all plays out. But you can expect that from us going forward.
Looking forward to it.
Yes, me too. So yeah, cool. Anything else? Any last words?
Say something inspiring, maybe.
Oof. Wait, put me ChatGPT. Maybe after the outro, just. But Jonas, thanks a lot for joining. Thanks for giving us the context we don't have on the O1 and whatnot.
Thanks for inviting me again.
No, it was always a pleasure. You always come very knowledgeable, prepared. So we really appreciate it because sometimes we can prepare ourselves a bit better, if I'm being honest. So, so that's it. Thanks, y'all.
Text
Asking O1
in a way
for
that's meaningful
inspiring
to some
thought.
people.
Okay. What does it say?
Hello,
Oh, it's take
I'm Bill Gates.
masking for O.
I would recommend
What is it?
TypeScript. Yeah, it
Have a
writes
You wait.
a
Ooh,
lot of
this is really
code
good.
for me, and
I got,
usually it's slightly wrong.
Success is
I'm
not
reminded,
final.
incidentally,
Failure is not
Russ
fatal.
here.
We'll wait for the outro.
This almost
I
makes me
guess.
happy that I didn't become a supermodel.
And then we can, and then Jonas can.
Boy, I'm sorry,
He'll-
guys.
he'll read
I,
it.
I
No,
don't know
I'll
what's
pick the
going
best
on.
one.
Yeah.
You pick the
Thank
best
you for
one.
the
So you're like the
opportunity
model
to
that
speak
chooses
today
the
about large neural networks. It's really an honor.
very meta.
Russ, Data Topics.
Welcome to the data.
Welcome to the Data Topics podcast.
So Murillo,
I'll go first.
you generated an inspiring quote to end the podcast on
Yes.
using GPT-4o, right?
Well, actually, it's GPT Auto. I have no idea. Just open it. Give me an inspiring quote. So I think it's the 401.
That's
Yeah.
4o. It's,
Okay.
it's on the top left.
It says ChatGPT Auto. Not idea. So for me, it got success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Winston Churchill.
Should check whether it's actually.
Yeah, I'm not
It stole
sure.
one. It even stole one.
Huh?
It even stole
It
one.
stole
I
one.
made something specific.
Oh, really? But what was your prompt? Because maybe Bart's like, if you were on a breathe.
The prompt was generate an inspiring quote to end the tech podcast on.
Okay, so more
So
specific.
and then it actually says it thought for 6 seconds.
Okay. Not a lot of thinking, yeah?
The chain of thought is the three topics. It determine the goal, it evaluate how it could be used, and the third topic is how to improve technology. I don't know what, but the output